wanted to share with you the 3 things that I stopped doing during COVID. And COVID really saved my life. I know that sounds crazy, and I don't mean to be trite to people who experienced loss during COVID, but for me, I was not in the best place in life during COVID, and COVID, it was just like the Lord plucked me out of something and set my feet on a new foundation. So it wasn't easy by any means, but I really felt like the Lord wanted me to share this with you. So the things that I quit in COVID in 2020, I stopped putting myself last. Going into COVID, and honestly, there's a whole lot of backstory here that I can't get into on one video. My beliefs, the majority of my life, have just been very self-limiting. That traces all the way back to like what we call in culture as our origin story. But all that to say that I did not know how to believe for myself, to see myself the way that God saw me, or still sees me rather. I didn't believe in myself, period. And I lived every aspect of my life like that. So I'll dive into that on another video. But I was existing, if I'm being honest. I honestly didn't know though. I was living my life, and it's a long story, but I'm here for it later on another video. I was afraid to take risks. So I had accepted everything that life gave me, and because I didn't really know how to believe for more. And if you again track this back to your thinking, I couldn't see myself the way God sees me. So why would I, have vision or insight into what his plans were for my life? How could I possibly believe for more? I didn't know who I was in Christ. Even though I was a Christian, I was saved when I was in 6th grade. So I just, was really getting less and less and less in life. And that was part of the journey I think that God had to get me to realize that something had to change in my thinking. But that was me pre-COVID, putting myself last. At the time, I was also putting my family last. I'm married and I have a son, and I was working a job in Dallas pre-COVID that was a 2-hour commute in one way in the morning, and then a 1 to 2 hour commute home at the end of every day. And I would usually, just because of Dallas traffic and the way all of that works on 75, I used to, stay later to have to not just sit in a car. So I would probably leave work, like say around 6:30 or 7, get home just in time to put my son in bed, maybe read him a story. And I was just living life on fumes, and my family was suffering for that. So my marriage was on life support, to say the least. There was very little communication between me and my husband. I mean, we were living a marriage through text. I mean, like, who wants to do that? That's not the reason that I got married. When we did communicate face to face, I was just full of anger. And so you can imagine how that went. A lot of times I would just kind of pick at him because I was mad at him for something. And so I was causing a lot of unnecessary arguments instead of working toward resolution. We were tag team parenting. And, we would just coordinate our son's pickups, drop-offs, activities, practice, those sort of things. And then we were really just living as roommates instead of husband and wife. So 0 intimacy, 0 just authentic communication, 0, conflict resolution whatsoever. Everything was just kind of like bubbling under the surface right before COVID happened. The last thing that I stopped doing, because of COVID, was I stopped putting God last in my life. I was, and I talked about this just briefly, I was saved in the Baptist church. I grew up in church, and I saw a lot of things that really made me question this whole Christian thing. Because, I mean, if you know, right, that a lot of Christians ask Jesus into their heart, but they don't ever develop and become disciples. And, I'm one of them. I'm sitting here talking to you about it. So, I was discipled when I was in 6th grade. And then life happened and I wanted to be accepted. I didn't have a support system or a network of kids who were trying to do what I was doing. So it was just easier to kind of like put Jesus on the shelf and go be in the world and then keep Jesus on Sunday. So the fruit of that, of growing up with that kind of mentality, when you commingle that with not knowing your true identity in Christ and not seeing the Lord as your Father who loves you, can just really, everything that was going on in 2020 was an overflow of habits that were slowly started eons ago in my life. So just to kind of give you paint the picture here of what my spiritual life looked like pre 2020, I really just was trying to control my outcomes and trying to control my relationships, trying to control my job, trying to keep my job, trying to control my mental health in unhealthy coping mechanisms. And I think when everything came to a head, I described myself as that person who would show up on Sundays and check the God box. And I really love to live like if I could touch the wall at church, I would sit that far back in church, because I had a really negative mindset about churchgoers. I was dealing with shame. I was dealing with rejection. I was dealing with a lot of these things that kept me from moving into that space with like my whole heart. And when you're trying to be God in your life, you're not going to let God be God in your life. So I had really, we were going to church probably, and a lot of it was, my husband and I were having marriage problems. So we would go and we would, participate in a service, but it was hit or miss. I wasn't really going in to pursue God. At that point, I really didn't have a great desire to really work on my marriage. I would just say pursuing a personal relationship with God was just not a priority, but I was just bleeding out in areas of my life and blaming myself for why it wasn't going the way that I thought it should. So, the Lord will let you design your life, and then when you screw it up, he's like, okay, are you ready to give me the reins now? So I'm just grateful that it didn't end worse than what it probably or possibly could have. But I was really, it was like heaping spoonfuls of shame on me, because I designed this life and then I thought, it's not working, so therefore I'm a failure with this. And so it was just like shame on shame on shame on shame. And I would say that if you saw me from the outside, pre-2020, you would not know any of this. I probably was a little bit, maybe a lot, depending upon who you ask. But I was a little bit compensating for all of this in life, if I had to put a definition on it. But overall, from the outside, I had all of the markings of a good Christian. I was showing up, checking the God box. I wasn't it's not like I'm a thief or I was stealing or I was doing anything horrible in work. I was still married. I hadn't divorced. I hadn't done all of those things. I was, existing in life. I would just say I was keeping Jesus on Sundays, and I would not really be one that would raise the Christian flag in life, so, but you have to understand how desperately I needed God, and I knew I did. I did not know how. I remember there was one day in my car, I turned 40 that year, so there was a lot of midlife things going on, inside of me, just what, I'm halfway through my life, supposedly, is what they say. So where am I? What have I accomplished? What do I want to do in the next 40 to 50 to 60 years? And honestly, I kind of just started to spiral, because I was I'm not happy at my job. I'm not happy in my marriage. My son was, taking all of that in as a very kinesthetic person, and really I could see that that fruit starting to take shape in his life and what it meant to him, and just the language that I was using in my life was starting to become his tape recorder. And I knew that something needed to change, but I didn't know how. So we say at our church that when you put things in the right order, things just work better. So my pastor says, and they're amazing. I'm gonna drop their information in the comments. But my pastor says that there's 2 ways to do life: God's way or the world's way, or you could say God's way or the wrong way. And I was really just done doing it my way, which was the world's way. Just, keeping Jesus over here in a little sliver of my big pie chart, and then doing everything that I wanted to do, and then thinking that having a tiny sliver of God was enough to, bless my life. And the Lord wanted to do so much more. And I'm just so grateful for that, because I'm on the, 4 years on the other side, and I feel like my life looks completely different, and I think different. I hope I act different. I hope the people that I'm still connected to would say that they've seen some growth in my life. But that said, pre-COVID, my mental health was suffering. I was taking medication for that. I was drinking for that. My marriage was suffering, and my son was suffering. And then COVID happened. And, COVID saved my marriage. It saved my son. It saved, my mental health. But it wasn't really COVID. It was the Lord. So, if you grew up in church, you've probably heard that we serve the God of second chances. So, I believe that origin came from the prodigal son, and basically, if I were to call myself prodigal daughter, it would be, I grew up in this house. I knew the way my God wanted things done, and I wanted to serve him. But then there comes a point in everyone's life where you can say, all right, I'm going to continue to submit to your will, Lord, or I'm going to say, go ahead and let me do it, because I can do it better. And that's what I did. I just didn't know it. And I think that's probably the sneakiest thing, is that these things don't happen overnight. You don't wake up and say, I'm going to rebel against God today. It's just that you wake up, and just like way back in the beginning of the Bible, everything starts with a thought. And then a thought, your thinking becomes your speaking becomes your living. So what you see, what you do, how you act, and all of those things. So, but basically, I would just say that just like in the parable, when the son realized, like, I've messed this up, I have done everything possible to do it right, and I've screwed it up. And the Bible doesn't say this, he does say, I'm not worthy to be called your son, which I definitely struggled with feelings of worthlessness, and knowing that, man, I really, spoke one thing and lived another. And so it gives me grace for people who I see living that out, because I know that sometimes you can just get so cyclical in the way that you do things that you don't know how to stop. So, but for me, stopping meant this time out of shelter in place and really getting to experience my family. Believe it or not, I was not stressed during shelter in place. We were watching the news, but I was more stressed in my life than I was being at home with my family. So it's like the Lord gave me this preview of, this is what it's supposed to be like, and this is what I want to do for you. It's rest, and it's let me take the reins, and let me make something beautiful of this. So, yeah, there's more to the story, and at some point I'll share it on here. But I really felt like that's what I was supposed to tell you today. And if you are someone who is struggling with where you are in your journey, or maybe you just feel like you're out of options and nothing's working right for you, I would say that the turning point for me, I think when God started to work, was when I threw up my hands. And this was still pre-COVID. I just said, Lord, I don't know what to do. I have screwed everything up in my life. And I really got to that place of desperation and surrender. So if that's you today, I would just say, go to God and tell him, because I truly believe that everything started to change as soon as I got done with doing it my way. So maybe you need to quit a few things today. And I am on the other side. Like when I quit, there's so much more I need to tell you that I can't get into on this video, but I will at another point. There's so many things that I had to quit. I had to quit my job. I had to quit relationships. I had to quit the way that I was thinking. And I really had to go into an incubator and like a little baby, but I was an adult who needed nurturing and needed, to start taking every thought captive and making it obedient to Christ. And, a woman who needed to dream again, and just like, there were things that I needed to stop. There were things that I needed to start. And the Lord was faithful. And I'm on the other side of that, unashamed, telling you this story, in hopes that maybe it will inspire you or someone you love or care about just to keep going, but also know when you're trying to control. And, my mom used to say this, like, the Lord will get your attention, one way or the other. He will start kind of like, I'm going to compare it to water or rain rather. So he will start as like sprinkles. And if you see sprinkles in your life of things, it's like, oh my gosh, life is not going good. It's sprinkling, and you continue to resist. He will make a steady rain, and then he will make a thunderstorm, and then he will cause a tornado, or he'll pull back, to allow things to come into your life to make you see that you need him to do it for you. And he's your creator. No one knows what you need more than Jesus. So praying for you. I don't want to minimize what you're going through, but I do want to tell you there's hope on the other side if you will stick with it, if you will lean in, if you will pursue God, if you will let him heal your heart, if you will rededicate your life to him. You can have an amazing life full of dreams and blessings, no matter what it looks like out there. So I love you, and I hope you have a great day. God bless.